Hey everybody, it's Uyak here back in another video. Since there's no new Made in Abyss episode this week, I decided this was the best time to take a look back at this season of Made in Abyss, because I feel like this season of Made in Abyss has truly changed anime forever. But before we get into that, if you do enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for similar content in the future. Without further ado, let us get straight into it. Now, this season of Made in Abyss has truly changed anime forever, in my opinion, because in a lot of anime nowadays, they're too afraid to adapt things from the manga because it's too gruesome. But I think this new season of Made in Abyss proved that even if you have gruesome content, the anime is only amplified by this because it truly displays what the story is meant to be. And this is what Made in Abyss Season 2 starts off with exactly. In fact, in the first scene in episode 1 of this season, we see Vuako get assaulted by her caretaker. I mean, this was ridiculous for an anime to open up with a scene like this. I'm sure nobody was expecting this, and it definitely took everyone by surprise. But in my episode 1 review, I said that this adds to the content, because when you see a scene like that in episode 1, it pulls you in, it makes you angry, it gets you emotional, and that makes you more in touch with the story. That makes you care more for a character like Vuako. And that was exactly the purpose of episode 1, was to build a sense of connection with these past characters and also to inform us of the history. Because not only did we see Vuako, we were introduced to Wazukan, Bailiff, I mean, the three sages, as they call them. They call them the three sages as a sense of importance. These are the important characters. And we are taking on their journey, about how they embarked on this journey with various ships in search of the Golden City. And how by the time they even found the entrance to the abyss, they were the sole surviving ship. And this is only the start of the troubles, because once they got on this island in the first episode, they had to deal with the natives. They don't know the normal language, and they were automatically hostile because previous adventurers were hostile. But eventually this group starts communications with this native tribe, and while they're doing this, we're introduced to one of the most integral characters of season 2, Arumui. Now, since it's only the first episode here, there's no way for us to know how important Arumui is at this point in the story. We only find out later that she plays an integral part in the 6 Layers story. The first episode then shows us the struggles the crew has descending the abyss, and it finally ends off the episode with this scene of the crew laying eyes on the 6th layer, and Vuako is saying in the narration that they found what they were looking for. In episode 2, we're taken back to the characters we know. I'm talking about Riko the Menace. I'm talking about Reg the Brainless. I'm talking about Nanachi the Caring. These are all characters we know. It gives us, the viewers, a sense of familiarity. Episode 2 was essentially this group that we already knew being introduced to the 6th layer. They explored the 6th layer. They found animals they could eat, where to sleep at, how to make shelter, etc. What creatures, what predators live in this 6th layer. We found all of that out in this episode. But the two biggest things to take away from this episode was when the whole crew was sleeping, someone seemingly went through their belongings and Riko's white whistle disappeared. Not only had her white whistle disappeared, but there was remains of small animals with their, yes, anus being filled with hair. Riko's hair in particular. Now, this is seen as very odd by the crew, but we find out the meaning later in the season. The second big thing to take away from this episode is we are introduced to the Hollow Village, a village of hollows. And after we are introduced to this village and these weird looking creatures, this episode ends off. Now, the third episode essentially introduces us to this hollow village in the form of Kaja. Kaja is the guide for the village. We are first made aware of the fact that the force field does not exist in this village, which means that Riko can willingly ascend without having to worry about dying. We also find Riko's white whistle, and it looks as if this weird hollow is breaking the white whistle. But we find out what this hollow is trying to do is refine Prushka into her true form. Riko then leaves Prushka in the care of this polisher, and they continue on their tour. And this is where things get odd. And I mean very odd, because we are introduced to the market. And essentially, the way that Kaja explains it is that this village is based on value. So if somebody views something as extremely valuable, or the village views something as extremely valuable, then that thing is extremely valuable. And that can be sold for value in the market or to other persons in this village. And I say it gets odd because as Kaja is explaining this, he says that he would like the first opportunity to buy Riko, as human children are seen as one of the most valuable things in this village. Value is the currency in this village. And we're introduced not only to Kaja and a lot of other hollows we find out that have this weird obsession with Riko, a literal child. Hollows that also value having tubes going through them, and hollows that value slicing apart the bodies of others. And I still can't get over this scene of when they said that. You see this creature with a bunch of blades protruding out of it, and we see this small little cute little bunny that is seemingly going to get sliced apart, because that is what this creature views as valuable. We are then shown how this is actually regulated, because you can't just steal things from people or take value from others in this village. And this is shown when a bunch of hollows crowd Riko, Reg, and Nanachi, and Mania gets squeezed so hard, in fact, that her innards literally come out of her anus. Yes, and they have to be pushed back in. And since Riko is so troubled by this, the powers of the village, the balancing as they call it, punish this hollow for harming Mania. After this horrific scene plays itself out, the whole group decides that they need somewhere to stay. So they find this motel and they rent a room, and then they make some very questionable decisions, Riko in particular, and these questionable decisions leave her with some very bad outcomes. And this causes Reg and Nanachi to go in search of supplies to help her out. And in doing so, they notice that there's a bunch of commotion. Everybody is gathering up. And this is where we learn about Faputa. Faputa is the embodiment of value, as Kaja explains it, and also an integral character of this season. Reg then sets his eyes on Faputa, and the episode ends off with this scene of the old crew in the past discovering the interference units. Now, episode 4 is where things truly start to kick off. I mean, the first scene of the episode, Reg gets seemingly violated by Faputa, a common occurrence in this season, by the way, but he gets violated by Faputa and her lying over him, and he has these flashbacks of some similar memory that he can't really recall, but it's resonating with him in a way. Faputa then has this interaction with the villagers to where she looks behind her and she notices they're all staring at her in awe, and she gets freaked out and takes Reg with her. We then see Nanachi, who is with Kaja. They then start discussing things that Nanachi values, and Nanachi learns that a version of Miti is alive in this village and being held by a bailiff. We are then taken back to Reg and Faputa, and they are in this cavern, And Faputa starts asking Reg, what is wrong with you? Do you not remember this place, etc.? And Reg starts saying, I want to know what I am and I lost my memories. So if you know who I am, please tell me. And this leads to something very odd. Faputa starts inspecting to see if Reg is really Reg. And when I say inspecting, I'm talking about looking at his helmet naturally, but also stripping him down and poking his belly button and then licking the blood from his belly button. I mean, this is some very odd things here. After Reg gets violated, as he commonly does in this season, he then decides enough is enough and kicks her off of him, and then he decides to leave. But as he leaves, an important detail here is that Faputa knows Reg as Reg, but Reg claims that Rico named Reg Reg. So this is a very odd coincidence, if you want to call it that. But I have an idea that this has to do with the meaning behind the whole story. Reg then departs back to Rico and Nanachi in the village, and as he's leaving, he sights Faputa's interference unit and spots a bunch of eternal fortunes falling from the layers above. And then we are introduced back to the menace Rico. And this is where Rico makes some very questionable decisions. She leaves the motel in search of Nanachi and Reg, and not knowing the language, she's kind of doesn't know what to do. And being a human child who's valuable in this village, I mean, the balancing will balance. Yes, if somebody tries to harm Rico. But that's not going to stop the Hollows from trying to take Rico. And that is exactly what happens. Rico starts asking around like some oblivious tourist where Nanachi and Reg are at. And she ends up getting tailed by this group of Hollows who essentially jump her in an alleyway. And I mean, more than jump. She got assaulted, to say the least. But luckily for her, Ma saves her from any more trauma, and they then visit this restaurant with some very questionable food. But Rico, being Rico, decides that it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, so might as well eat it. And she eats the disgusting food that gets served to her. This is also where we're introduced to Wazukan in the hollow form. And after meeting Wazukan, that's where the scenes with Rico end, and we are shown Nanachi. And Nanachi, directed by Kaja, meets Bailiff and also sets her eyes upon Mitty. And the episode then ends off with this scene of a now present Vuako, who seems to be imprisoned and stripped nude in this sort of balancing space. Episode 5 opens up with this scene of Nanachi with Mitty, and Bailiff is peering over her. It looks as if Bailiff have captured Nanachi in this episode. We then get scenes of Reg trying to make his way back to the village. The only problem is he doesn't know where the village is. So this ends up with him tangoing with the dragon and seemingly getting smacked around. And then as he's falling, Faputa's interference unit actually saves him and then helps him out a bit. And as this interference unit is guiding Reg back to the village, he says that the small creatures with hair filled in them was a way to test Reg, because when he came to this layer, he made no attempts to search for Faputa. Reg also asks him what type of interference unit he is and what is he, and the interference unit says he has no data on that and that Reg needs to discover that out himself. We then cut back to Rico, and Rico introduces herself to Wazukan, saying that she is a white whistle, but her white whistle is not with her at the moment. And Wazukan says, all of that is great. And then he goes in for what looks like maybe a handshake or fist bump, but he flicks her hand away and then says, "See you later," and dips out. Riko then finishes her meal, and she actually asks the attendant and meal cooker, Mugi, to teach her some of the language. And this is where we're shown that Riko actually learns how the language works. And at the end of this exchange between them, Mugi says that she can't wait to get her hands on a human child now that she has spent some time with Riko, once again in a very weird way. Before Riko leaves, Riko asks Mugi if she knows where her friends would be. And this is where Mugi reveals that there is this area at the edge of the village that no one enters. And that's exactly where the menace Riko decides to go. We then see Riko go into this dark cave area, and she actually meets Vuako, the current Vuako, still chained up, similar to the last episode's ending. When Riko meets Vuako, they have this conversation about who Vuako is, and she starts to reveal things about the village, about how this village had a very horrific past, and that she was imprisoned because she opposed the creation of this village. And as Riko is hearing Vuako explain about why Vuako got in this situation and the village as a whole and what all of these balancing around her are, Riko decides that it's best to free Vuako, and that is exactly what Riko does. And once they leave this restricted area, Vuako is once again completely nude, so they have to put on some type of clothes. And after they put on some type of clothes, they actually go to Bailiff's place because Riko is looking for her friends. And Vuako states that she cannot go in there, but Riko goes in there. And as she enters Bailiff's den, she actually sees an asleep Nanachi. And this is where it is explained what happened. Nanachi viewed Mitty as so valuable that she was willing to trade herself in order to be with Mitty. She is in this sort of sleep state, and Riko is trying to do whatever she can in order to get Nanachi back. Once again, the way the village works is you have to use value to get value. So Bailiff proposes that Riko gives a part of her in order to get Nanachi back. And in that proposal, he offers her that she can give him both of her eyes, both of her legs, or half of her innards. And that is where episode 5 ends. Riko is thinking about which part of her she should give. Episode 6 starts in the same way that the last episode ended, and that Riko is considering which part of her she should give. And I mean, she's actually considering which part of her she should give. In fact, she goes as far as to break down each part and what the negatives would be. Then she finally decides which part she is willing to trade for, but right before she says it, Kaja grabs her thankfully and tells her that if anything is taken, it's all over. Nanachi then wakes up and tells Riko that if anything is taken from her, everything is going to end and she just needs to leave Nanachi. Riko then leaves Bailiff's den and meets back up with Vuako, and they're walking through the village when a large needle hits the wall beside them. We then find out that it's customary of this village to lead in creatures from the outside and hunt it, and that's how they increase the value of this village. They then notice that this creature is heading towards Prushka. This causes Riko and the group to rush back to the jeweler to make sure that Prushka is okay. And when they arrive at the jeweler, we actually find out that Prushka has been completed. She is in her true form. Riko takes Prushka because the jeweler gives it to her for free, because white whistles always find their way back to the owner. And after the jeweler gives the stone back to Riko, he says that he actually ejaculated while he was finishing it. When he finished it, yes, yes. And then we see him turn into this giant monster and start fighting off the creature from the outside. Unfortunately for him, the creature overpowered him and then killed him. We then see the village protector, one of the 3 sages, Jeromo, come out and start to fight the creature. Unfortunately for Jeromo, he is on the losing side of the battle, as these creatures of the abyss are absolutely no joke. Riko thinks ahead and comes up with a plan to capture this creature after Geromo is defeated. His plan consists of luring the creature while riding on Kaja. Yes, riding on Kaja. And the creature eventually gets lured to a large mirror, and this causes the creature to freeze up. As the creature is occupied with the mirror, Riko starts the next step of her plan. She lights the air under this creature on fire in order to cause it to go up into the air. She then commands all of the villagers to use rope to capture this creature, and when it is captured, they all start attacking it. Everybody in the village then assumes the creature is no longer a threat, but it turns out this creature that everybody thought was immobilized was not that. In fact, it grabs a bunch of villagers and it even grabs Ma. And this causes a slow motion scene where Prushka appears behind Riko and tells her to use the white whistle. And that is exactly what Riko does. And when she blows on the white whistle after she does it, Reg then comes and cuts all of the captured villagers free, including Ma, and then he fights with this creature. But as he's fighting with the creature just seemingly is dead. And we actually find out from Wazukan that this creature is not one singular creature. It's a bunch of creatures that make up this big blob. It's a bunch of males, and there was a queen. The queen died, so the males need to go and find a new nest. Wazukan knew what this creature was and refused to tell everybody else. He knew it, and his excuse for that was, look at all their gracious faces. They had fun. That was his explanation for not sharing this information. Wazukan then says that if they get a part of Faputa, then they will probably be able to get Nanachi back. They all then sit down, and Vuoko explains that Faputa is the embodiment of value. And Reg says he wants to go meet Faputa in order to understand more, and that's exactly what he does. Everybody who still remains in the room, Riko, Mugi, and Kaja all sit down and listen to Vuoko's story. And what a great story it is, but we will cover that in part 2 of Made in Abyss Season 2 in a nutshell. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, and honestly, if you haven't subscribed at this point, I mean, you've basically watched the full 22 minutes of the video, so I would honestly just subscribe at this point if I were you, just saying. But like and subscribe for part 2 of Made in Abyss Season 2 in a nutshell. I will see you in the next video.